people? Okay.
No, we won't be able to see anyone.
Okay. Just will we see their comments
Yep, we'll be able to see their comments.
and everybody can see us?
Yep,
Okay. Perfect. Perfect.
yep.
Wonderful.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. I see we still have some people rolling in.
Hello,
All
folks.
right.
Hello, hello.
All right. So hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest webinar in our wellness webinar series. My name is Mackenzie, and I'm the coordinator of programs and development at Strong Minds, Strong Kids Psychology Canada. We're delighted to have you all joining us for today's session called Everyday Strength, How to Leverage Your Natural Tendencies to Reduce Personal and Professional Stress, presented by Trey Gamage, who's here with us today. This engaging session will explore a crucial yet often overlooked aspect of social emotional intelligence, that is adult education. So while emotional awareness and management are critical components of social emotional competence for children, they're seldom taught to adults. So in this dynamic session, you'll gain valuable insights and practical tools to enhance your social emotional learning skills, including understanding their importance for both adults and children, learning how to identify and develop your natural SEL skills, and discover ways to leverage your strengths to effectively reduce stress. So before we get started, I'd like to just go over a few housekeeping items. So first, this webinar will be recorded, and we'll distribute the recording to all participants after the webinar. And the recording will also be posted on our website, which will also be included in a follow-up email. So you'll have our array, or really our library of free wellness webinars. And second, this webinar will be about 60 minutes long, and that does include a Q&A period at the end. So we'll be fielding questions throughout the session. So please go ahead and ask your questions throughout. You can do that by clicking the Q&A button that's at the top of your screen, and then you can type in your question from there. We will not be referring to the chat for questions. Please use the Q&A function for your questions. So before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to acknowledge that the Strong Minds, Strong Kids Psychology Canada head office is located on the sacred land that has been a site of human activity for over 15,000 years. This land is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas of New Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and the Wendat, and is now home to many diverse peoples. We acknowledge that the City of Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. We acknowledge these nations and any other recorded or unrecorded First Peoples who cared for the land as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land named Toronto, where the trees meet the water, or the gathering place. As settlers, we entered into an agreement to share this land equitably. And as settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. We are grateful for the opportunity to work with communities and on this territory. So for those of you who are new to our organization, welcome. Strong Minds, Strong Kids Psychology Canada is a registered national charity dedicated to nurturing resilience in children and youth through the use of psychological science. And this year is particularly exciting for us because it's our 50th anniversary. So for 50 years, we've been using psychological science to equip children, youth, and adults with the tools they need to manage the many adversities in life. So to help us kick off our milestones, we are hosting a Growing Minds conference, which includes a jam-packed day of informative sessions held by leading psychologists in the field and child-serving professionals on a variety of topics. You can see all of our sessions there on the screen. So the conference will be hosted at the Marriott Eaton Centre in Toronto on November 14th. So if you're interested to learn more, to view our array of sessions, speakers, and to grab your tickets, you can go to strongmindstrongkids.org. So now I'd like to introduce you to our speaker for today's webinar. Trey Gamage is a strength-based consultant that helps leaders and teams leverage their natural strength for professional success. utilizing a combination of a social emotional learning and strengths-based principles for folks to eliminate blind spots, set clear goals, and reduce conflict within teams. Since 2017, Trey has delivered 350 plus training sessions across 38 states, and now he's joining us in Canada, which is fantastic. So with 700 educators participating in his strengths-based assessment program, his mission is to help you leverage your strengths to make it easier for you to do what you love. So welcome, Trey. We're so excited to have you for this session, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you as well. As I get my screen shared there, if you'll allow me access, Mackenzie, I'm excited to be here. I should have added to there that I have been to Halifax in Nova Scotia in October 22 to serve at a school psychology conference. So I hope to get back to the Canadian borders at some point. But for now, I'm here in South Carolina in the United States. Thank you all for joining me here today. I really enjoy engaging with you all, and I'm a big believer that these workshops and these sessions work the best when you're included and you're involved. So I want to get us kicked off. I have several QR codes and links I'm going to share today, but don't worry, I'm going to give us time to work with them all. My first question, I just want to wake us up in the chat for a minute. Fist to 5, how familiar are you with SEL? Fist, Trey, I don't know a thing about SEL. I know all about mental health. I'm an expert there. But these terms, SEL, strengths, emotional intelligence, I don't know what that stuff is. 5, oh, I'm an expert. I doubt if you teach me anything new. Let me know in the chat where you fall on understanding SEL. Is it more of a fist? I don't know anything. Is it a 5? I know everything. Or is it a 3? I know a good bit. Good. I see these coming in. We got some 4s, we got some 3s. This will help us see how much depth we can get into. Wonderful. Thank you all for the speedy engagement as well. 2s, 3s, a couple 4s. So let's see if we could bump that understanding up at least one notch in our time together today. Thank you very much for the comments and the honesty there. Our first slide here is a question. So I've got one more comment for you in the chat, and I'm also going to drop a link. I'm a big believer in strengths. How do we use our strengths to leverage our success? And so to gauge this here, one more time in the chat for me, I'm going to drop this link. This is your onboarding survey. So I've got a survey for you to take at the beginning that's going to ask you similar questions about how you leverage your strengths. And at the end, I've got a satisfaction survey that'll ask you some similar questions. Once you're done with that, go ahead and respond to the chat on how you leverage your strengths to be more effective in your role. See a couple of those responses coming in so far. We'll give you about a minute to respond to the onboarding survey and also respond in the chat. I really want to show my appreciation for your responses in the chat right now as well. You all are not wasting any time. You all are glad to be here. Rochelle, I can't see your face, but I like your energy. I would say 2.5, and you had a nice comment earlier as well. I would say a 3. I feel like you're really analyzing these. Thank you, Brianna. We'll take about 15 more seconds, finish that survey here for me, and then we're going to dive in. And since you all are at the 2-3, you all are mental health professionals, we're going to shoot it straight from the hip, okay? And we're going to be really upfront about our conversations today. So first things first, when you think about social emotional learning, this is in the United States of America. So this is a survey that looked at how preparation programs prepare teachers and educators for programs once they graduate college. In my opinion, I think that you can run a similar survey in different countries and also in different programs. So they're measuring teachers. We can say the same for perhaps school psychologists. You could tell me if I'm wrong, mental health. But there is a huge lack. You see, there's a strong focus on social awareness. There's almost no focus on self-awareness and self-management. For adults, for teachers, there's minimal focus. For students, there's none. Okay, and then the required coursework in SEL learning, Same thing. We see 0.43% for the self aspects, and we see much higher rates for the social aspects, even if it's minimal. My concern there is that how can we focus on others if we don't understand ourselves? At what point in education is it time for me to understand my skills, my strengths, my assets? And I see some of you are have some tools. You're able to use your strengths often. Some of you are at the 3. You're using your strengths every day. And there's also some of us that aren't sure how to use and leverage our strengths all the time and every day. But there's plenty of research that shows us how leveraging our strengths leads to improved satisfaction and less burnout and quitting as well. Here's another question for us. This is a chart. This is one of the first frameworks that introduced me to social, emotional, and academic outcomes. And this chart lays out a beautiful drawn out line for us visual learners to see how teachers' social, emotional competence and well-being impacts all of these factors through student social, emotional learning and academic outcomes. And so you can take this out of context. Again, I recognize that this is talking specifically to teachers and you may be in a different profession. I want you to put this in your context and think about how your own social, emotional well-being, synonym being emotional intelligence or recognition of your strengths, impacts the individuals, the groups, or the people that you work with. Take about 30 seconds to think about this chart, how it relates to your work, and summarize this model in 10 words or less. I'm going to give you another minute to do that here, and we're framing our mindset to have a deeper conversation about how we show up to be effective in our role, doing things that are natural to who we are. I'm going first to give you all some examples. This was, I think, one of my original responses, and I have some information out there about this too. How can I support students if I'm not supporting the teachers? How can I support the people I work with if I'm not okay myself? That's my first thought. And we'll give you about 30 more seconds to let this resonate with your role and your profession before we move on. I see you, Giselle. Relates to the oxygen mask analogy on a flight. Put your mask on before you put someone else's mask on. Yep, yep, yep. And there's several context factors that can influence how we feel, how our kids feel, the culture and climate of our classroom as well. How to support success in schools and classrooms. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Alexandra. I'll give us a few more moments to let some more responses roll in, and then we'll continue our conversation. See me looking off to the side. I'm looking at my other screen here. Sarah, parents are looking for support for their kids, but it helps to provide them with support to manage their own stress. This improves their child's stress as well. Raise the roof. You got it. We can go home. We can go home. Thank you, Sarah. We cannot lead by example if we're not prioritizing our well-being. Your personal, emotional well-being can translate to your students. I love that. Y'all get it. You all get it. You all get it. You all get it. And for those of us that are not quite the experts that we think that we are at SEL, I want to prove you wrong. because your responses here show me that you have a really serious understanding of social emotional learning. These are thorough responses and show us that you recognize what these things mean. And the cool thing about social emotional learning is it's not rocket science. School is a social place. People are emotional, and every day we learn. This cannot be outlawed. We can put intention behind it. We can put frameworks behind it. We can put curriculum and lessons behind it. But regardless if you're following that curriculum or not, you are practicing SEL. The real question is, are you doing it with intention? Let me read a couple more responses here and I'll continue. I don't work in the teaching profession. However, working with leaders across large organizations, I find that leaders lack self-awareness, resulting in a disconnect between themselves and their direct reports. They find it difficult to manage their own stresses and therefore struggle to provide assistance to others. A lot of the research I use, and I'm going to show you in a minute, these things are in a lot of ways synonyms. So Renee, you're hitting on a component that we're going to explore a bit more here in a second. If we look at emotional intelligence over time, and notice how I just switched from social emotional learning to emotional intelligence. They mean the same thing. EQ was 4 times more powerful than IQ when predicting success in their field. Emotional intelligence scores have fallen while intelligence scores have risen over the last however many years in that same time frame. And we see what our world looks like, at least in the United States. I'm not going to speak for Canada. In a worldwide study of what companies were looking for in hiring new employees, of the most desired attributes were EQ competencies, 33% of which, 33% of attributes were other competencies. So what is this saying? Your personal and professional success is more dependent on your emotional intelligence, your EQ, than your IQ. And the reason that I'm interchanging some of these words is because they're synonyms. Emotional intelligence was founded around 1990 with the book by Daniel Goleman called What is Emotional Intelligence? I think he has a new book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. John Mayer and Peter Salovey popularized the term around this time as well. The term social emotional learning came about by Daniel Goleman, the same man, around 94. And so these practices, I've spoken to other founders, these practices go back to the 70s, character development and other frameworks to develop. These terms are relatively new. My preferred term is strengths training, because when I go into communities and I talk to leaders or teachers or educators about adult SEL, they don't want to listen to me and they think it's only for kids or only for certain kind of kids. So when I move forward and as I talk about strengths, know that I'm also talking about social emotional learning and emotional intelligence. To further address Renee's comment, okay, Renee, you got too many good questions right now. Okay, you're gonna have to let me get into some of it. Matter of fact, Renee, add this question to the Q&A, please, so I don't get too distracted. But I do want to address your other comment that talked about leaders. So some of the research that I use is not just teachers, but I will use Gallup research. And here's another QR code for you that I'll share in the chat as I share the story. Gallup has some research where they talk about 44% of managers don't receive feedback from their subordinates. And so to your point, most people are going through life never giving feedback, and leaders are never receiving feedback from the folks that they work with and work for. And so that leads to disconnects where you see that there are these strengths that everybody recognizes, but there's also these blind spots that nobody recognizes. And those blind spots are where folks fall off. So now we're going to get into how we can understand our own strengths first, so then we can recognize how to support other people. That starts off with the platinum rule, treating people the way that they want to be treated. What I've shared in the chat is a link to a workbook. That workbook is called Introduction to Strengths Workbook, and it includes several activities. I'm not going to walk explicitly through every activity, but know that this is your application toolkit of all the information that's discussed. And there's 3 activities at the bottom that you can use to address these same topics with adults. Moving forward here, we've got the golden rule versus the platinum rule. The golden rule needs minimal explanation. The platinum rule is treating others the way they want to be treated. So once more, let me know in the chat which rule is your preference, gold or platinum. Also tell me why. What do you think? Golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, or should we be looking at the platinum rule? Tracy, can you back up your response? Can you justify that for somebody that may not agree? I see Alexandra. Same for you, Vicky. Justify that for me. Seeing my gender and race is important to treating me well. Hi, Dr. Regis. Platinum because it's tuned into the other person's needs and not assuming their needs are based on your own. Platinum, I see you, Kaja. Forgive me if I pronounce your name incorrectly. Platinum, as everyone has unique perspectives and preferences on what works best for them. Acknowledge others' preferences. Platinum, we can assume what we want is what others want. Vicky, I want to be treated with equality and respect, equity and empathy. Therefore, I think others would like to be treated as such. Who wouldn't? Fair question. Platinum, life context, impact treatment. Wonderful responses. Keep reading these in the chat for us. And so, Vicky, you raise a good question here as well. I want to be treated with equality and respect and equity and empathy. Therefore, I think others would like to be treated as such. That's great for you. But how many people, and here's the thing that I recognize, I work with several different types of populations of students. And one thing that I recognize is that we all want these things, Vicky, but not everybody knows what those look like. And there may be some students or some people that you interact with that might want the same thing, but they've never seen it before. And so I can't assume because they're treating me poorly, because I have some kids that I work with, they will reject me via text or Google chat, but when they see me, they give me a hug. They're not sure how to communicate in between. And so if I take something like that personal, where me wanting equality, respect, equity, and empathy to a child that hasn't learned that yet, I may shun that child when they don't need to be shunned. Now, I know that I'm kind of soloing this item out, and I'm not saying that that's something that you do or would do, but that's the context that we're looking for there. And so I will acknowledge that there is certainly a time for the golden rule. And I also will say that in our profession, being mental health or leadership support, we also have to understand how to treat people the way that they want to be treated. The next question is, how am I supposed to know how somebody wants to be treated, especially if I've never met them before? Here's 2 questions that we're going to use to practice this. I like these responses. These are very good. Very good. So y'all have known me for about 24 minutes, and I want you to answer these 2 questions about me. Am I more direct and fast-paced, or am I more indirect and slow-paced? I don't have further direction for you or detail for you right now, but just respond quickly in the chat for me. Direct, fast-paced, or indirect, slow-paced. You can pick one word to respond, or both. Thank you. Direct, direct, direct. If you have a moment, I know I said one word. If you can type fast, you have 80 words, 90 words a minute. Tell me if I'm direct and indirect, and what's showing you that. How do you know that I'm direct? How do you know that I'm fast? The other question for me, you all are welcome to continue typing, is, am I guarded and task-oriented, or am I open and more people-oriented in the way that I communicate? Am I more guarded or am I more open? See, somebody said confident, assured, direct, quick to get to the point. You say what you're going to do and do it very clear. You address everyone by name and explicitly state directions. These are wonderful. And I take this as feedback as well, so thank you. Have already given lots of information, touche. Tone of voice, confident presentation, would have said moderate pace though. That's fair, and that's a wonderful understanding that there is nuance in this. I might be both. I would say direct and fast paced, open and people oriented. I see a combination. So let's just go with a one response for now. So I saw mostly fast paced, meaning I would be a D or an I, and I saw mostly open and people oriented. So that really makes me an I style, meaning that I'm direct and open. And you can see here, it shows that that makes me relatively persuasive. And also you're gonna see some assertiveness in me, which you all pretty much mentioned in some of your commentary of what makes me direct is some of that assertive nature. So I want you to take the same time and answer the same questions about yourself. Are you direct and fast-paced or indirect and slow-paced? You don't have to respond in the chat unless you would like to, but independently, respond to that question. I'll give you a couple moments to think about it. I know that you are both. I want you to think about in the workplace, am I more direct and fast-paced or indirect and slow-paced? Not at home or another environment, but in your work environment. Same for the second question. Are you guarded and task-oriented? Or are you open and people-oriented? I see your responses coming in here as well. A couple more seconds just to think about it, to wrap your head around it, then I'll show you what we're talking about here. This is a reminder to submit your questions to the Q&A component. Okay, I see slower pace, people-oriented, fast-paced, people-oriented, medium. If you all remind me, Mackenzie or somebody, I would like to share you all the detailed, direct and fast-paced. I have a document that shows you what that scale looks like. There's a 4-part scale, so you all can see the in-between. I don't have it in the workbook right now. We can get that added in there. Good. So based on these responses, we're able to actually make some modifications. Again, we're not talking rocket science here, but we saw that I'm an I style. So if you are an S or if you are a C, you're a slower paced style, here's some strategies for you to consider when we start to engage. One, don't rush into tasks. Mackenzie and I, we took about 10 minutes to just catch up for a moment, and then we spent about 5 minutes getting ready for the session. That's perfect. Get excited with them. Speak, move at a faster pace. You all can see and feel my energy right now. And so if you don't carry that energy as well, it's going to be hard for me to get along, though I recognize scenarios may be different, right? And so you can look at the same for you. If you were a D, S, or C, here's some things, and you can tell folks this. If you have stress and you have tension in your best and with your spouse, this may be part of the reason why. I'm fast-paced and my wife is slow-paced. I'm direct and my wife is indirect. So I might need to give this piece of feedback, hey, please build 5 minutes into our agenda for us to catch up. Hey, you know what? When we're done, if you're talking to me, please summarize the details. I recognize that's something I need to do now, or else I'm going to forget, right? When it comes to priority, meaning direct or indirect, here's some things. I'm speaking about the I because that's what we all did together, is recognizing my style. Make time to socialize. I kind of mentioned that. Take initiative to introduce yourself or start a conversation. Be open and friendly. And on the other side, how can I then engage with others? So here's a few more. So what about when I am working with an S style? I'm talking to over 50 people, 100 people, however many people are in here right now. Some of you are S and C styles. So some of you are knowing that I'm fast, but I have to slow down a little bit. And at least I have to be intentional about giving you 30 seconds to a minute to respond and not just being fast without you giving time. It says avoid arguments and conflict. So if I have a concern to bring to you, I shouldn't bring that concern to you out of anger. I should wait until I can actually have a conversation with you. And then for the C, don't interrupt. Seek and acknowledge their opinions. On this side, it says use a strong and confident voice. So I'm an I style. Here's a D. So use direct statements rather than roundabout, face conflict openly, give undivided attention. So I've got these really simple strategies, these tidbits, these nuggets that I can just share with somebody personally or professionally that will help me make bad relationships good and good relationships better. Let's talk about those 4 styles. So if you were direct and fast-paced, you were here. So the D style is direct and fast-paced. Excuse me, they're direct and guarded. They're direct, fast-paced, and guarded. They're risk takers, direct and forceful, self-reliant, decisive, and competitive. These are typically your leaders. As I work with organizations, I typically see 1 person, maybe 2 in an organization that is the D style when they come to work. The rest I see are a mix actually between these other 3. The I style is fast-paced and people-oriented. This person is influential, trusting, sociable, friendly, optimistic. This is your person that has energy as soon as they wake up in the morning. Steadiness, these folks are calm, steady, loyal, consistent, relaxed, patient, conscientious, analytical, systematic, courteous, precise, focused. I can tell you that most of our mental health specialists are going to be in this lane right here. Yes, Vicki, there's a quiz you can take, and you actually have part of that in your workbook, and there's a formal one you can take as well. So we'll talk about that in a moment. What this is a needs-motivated, observable, and emotional behavior assessment. It's a combination of nature, our inherent way, and our nurture, what we've learned. But what this full assessment is not is a measure of intelligence, skills, or education or experience. It's not even an indicator of your values. We're really looking at how you show up, how people perceive you. You all perceive me based on the behaviors that you observe. And so that's where these 2 power questions come into play. And Vicki, your question is right on time. In the workbook that I shared, and I'll reshare it here in a moment, there is one of the pages has this self-paced assessment you can take. And so what you see here on my screen is a list of characteristics for each of the styles. So the D style tends to act very assertive. I is very persuasive, very patient, very contemplative. So what I ask you to do, I think this is page 2 or 3, is actually go through all 16 of these columns and circle the ones that are most like you. In some of the columns, you may circle all 4. In some of the columns, you may circle at least 1. And some of them are not fun. So measuring maturity, giving up control, objectively handling rejection, standing up for self when confronted, not being defensive when criticized. Under stress, you may become dictatorial or critical, sarcastic and superficial, submissive and indecisive, withdrawn and headstrong. So you really are being asked to look into a mirror, Vicki, in this self process, which again, you can do with your students as well. I've done this with as low as 6th grade to complete this process. And this is the informal process where the rest of this workbook that I've shared in the chat walks you through different activities to debrief this material. And there is some videos and links that are embedded. So to close this out here, we've got about 10 minutes before we get into your questions. Another reminder here to put your questions in the Q&A if you've got them. When we think about understanding others and you think about adaptability, understanding your behavior style is only the first step. When we really want to use the power of behavior styles, of strengths, of social emotional learning, we have to know how to apply this information to the other people and in other situations. This way we can make good relationships better and challenge relationships good. And so there's really two skills that we need to be emotionally intelligent, or at least adaptable. One is flexibility, which is your willingness, and aptitude, which is your capability to adjust your approach to meet the needs of a situation. And I have no doubt that you are masters of what that looks like to change your approach to meet the needs of a situation. And what I'm really looking at here is intention. The last couple slides I want to show you here is one, this is a tension inventory. And so where it says pace, it's showing me where we're going to butt heads. If you think about your personal relationships, and matter of fact, go ahead and think about two relationships. Again, don't put these in the chat. One relationship that's personal and it has tension. Whether you get in an argument with your spouse or your brother, your sister, your mother, think about that challenging relationship. And also think about a professional relationship that may be challenging. Maybe it's a good relationship that there's still some things that nag you. Now that you've got those, I want you to think about the reason why you have conflict. Is it pace? Is it because I'm being too direct and I'm moving too fast? Is that why we have tension? If so, I have to be the one to slow down, or you have to be the one to communicate that I need to slow down. If it's the D and the C, I'm being more direct and they're being more indirect. I'm being more fast, they're being more slow. And so what's the pace that's getting us? I'm ready to go into a conversation and make a decision. You need time to analyze and think about what we're going to do before we say yes. That's why we're butting heads. When it comes to priority, the D is fast-paced, but they're guarded. The I is fast-paced, but they're open. And so it's the people versus task. The D is always ready to get things done. The I is always ready to catch up and tell a story. That's why we butt heads. Okay, I'm gonna come over to the pace and priority. So the D and the S, a lot of times the school leader or the organization leader is direct, they're fast-paced, they're guarded, and they're task-oriented. You happen to be indirect, slow-paced, open, and people-oriented. So in many ways, you're not getting what you need from your boss. And that can mean a couple things. Either your boss isn't aware of it and you're okay with that, or you might need to, have that conversation or even switch the kind of location that you're at. So this is where we find that pace and where we find that priority at. And in your workbook is also a relationship activity. So you can think about those two people, that relationship one, relationships two. Use your power questions to think about the style, pace, priority, and then think about the difference. Is it pace? Is it priority? Before using the strategies that we showcased for you to be able to implement. So there's a lot of information that I shared here. And the thing that I've been getting most from folks is, okay, Trey, this is all great, but now what? Now what do I do, Trey? Here is a tier 1 implementation plan that I'm looking at formalizing some more here over the coming weeks and months. But the first step, if you're wondering what can I do, like Vicki said, complete a strengths assessment. So there's some examples you've heard of. Gallup has the Clifton Strengths. There's one called Values in Action. This one is free. 16 Types is more of a personality test, as is Myers-Briggs. But with the conversation we've had, you may be able to flip it a little bit more. I listed some articles here that show you the comparison between DISC and the Myers-Briggs, as well as comparing a 4-factor personality assessments like the one that we looked at versus 5-factor. A couple of sample reports. Let me pause my screen here. On the other side, you see it says complete assessment debrief. So at the end, I'm going to talk to you all about a few giveaways, some opportunities for you all to participate in some of these strengths activities. And here's an example of what a full report looks like. So Vicky asked, is there a test that I can take? Absolutely. And that test you can take, again, I mentioned, Strengths Finder, Myers-Briggs, there's different types of assessments you can take. This one is called a DISC profile. So we use the same questions that you answered a moment ago. There's a digital assessment link that you'll use to take your assessment. And I'm skipping by some important pages, but you're going to answer those questions. And what you're going to see is your natural versus your adapted communication style. Your natural style represents your natural strengths, how you prefer to show up. In most cases, this might be your home life, very natural. And this person is a high D style. See that number at 73? This is the energy line, meaning above 50%, that's when you start to see observable behaviors. If it's a stay-at-home mom or a dad that's the only one working at home, they may be a decision maker, hence the reason that this D is so high. However, when we come to work, my adapted style kicks in. Remember, we are flexible to meet the needs of the scenario. But when I come to work, my C goes from 45 to 77, and my I goes from 41 to 80. While my D goes from 70 to 45. I'm not a math guy, so if I'm saying too many numbers, I apologize. But the key that I want you to see is that there is a correlation between the natural and the adaptive style. One type of correlation is a strong positive, where the strengths that I use naturally are the same strengths that I use to be successful in my workplace. A negative correlation means that the strengths that I use naturally are not the strengths that I use in my workplace. More energy, rules, and completing reports into planning for this process than you naturally have the capacity for, or the focus on, the skills for. Is this stressful for you? If the answer is no, and you say, I'm learning, I'm adapting, I'm growing, great. If the answer is no, this is how I have to show up for my kids, for my community, great. That also probably means that you have routines and systems in place to make sure that you can show up to be effective without burning yourself out. What that also looks like, and this is a different way to look at the same information. We've got the very assertive, this is your natural style, the circle, versus adapted. And there's no good or bad, there's no right or wrong. What this shows is that naturally this person is the more like you that is, the closer to the middle, the more flexible and adaptable you tend to be. So naturally, I'm very assertive. Adaptive-wise, I have a lot of flexibility and aptitude to shift, to meet other people's needs. But at what cost? And so if I can recognize that growth and that change and those challenges are appropriate for the season that I'm in, great. But if you are burnt out and you're tired and you feel like this ain't working no more, this is part of your rationale. After I share my feedback things, so we can get into our questions. This here is a summary of this sample report. And so what I typically do with schools or organizations is they complete these assessments, and then we finish this summary of your sample style report. And I will show you, no, I'm not going to show you the pages. It's too much to look at. The report gives us some do's and don'ts, summarizes our motivators, our needs, our strengths, your work style tendencies, areas for improvement. And what we typically will do is have folks complete this communication summary and share it with the person before you meet with them, or put it online in a database. So if I have a conflict with you or you have a conflict with me, you can reference my summary of a sample report. Every client, every patient, every parent that comes in has a report so that I can communicate with them in the most effective fashion. So that's the sample report that I want to show you there. And let me skip through or move through these slides to get us to our wrap up here. Almost there. So you complete in the chat. You can also do a virtual strengths training or a course. I've got 10 assessments to give away for you at the end of our time here, which is coming up in 2 slides. Let's make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah. And then on-site debrief. So you can complete the assessment independently as a leadership team. Okay, I'm back. Mackenzie checking in. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. I froze for a second. Okay, so let me get through here. We've got the strengths-based training. You can take this individually. You can do it school-wide. You can do it district-wide. From a debrief standpoint, you can do that independently. You can do it with a virtual course, one-on-one, or school-wide. There's some activity, do the tension style activity. Another resource that you can utilize and practice. There's adaptability strategies in the workbook that actually summarizes and culminates most of the information for you to use with your peers, whether that's PLCs, parents, families. Or any other members of your community. I'm going to turn my screen off here, my picture off here, so that we get a little bit more bandwidth as this thing keeps freezing on me. And I see Tracy had to go. Here's the QR code for the feedback survey. Again, we had the onboarding survey that kind of assessed where you are with effectiveness in your role. This post-training satisfaction survey serves in a similar fashion. Let me drop this link for you in the chat. I'll give you a moment to finish that, to access that form and complete it. And if you give me about 1 minute here, Mackenzie, I'll pass it back over to you. I appreciate this feedback so much. We've implemented these kind of training programs and sessions with over 800 educators and mental health professionals across the country and even Canada, plus the United States. And so your feedback goes a long way into how we're able to adapt and modify our work together. In the first link that I just shared, that feedback form, there is a button for you to select the options for us to follow up with you. I'll send you an email. If you don't want me to email you, that's fine. No harm, no foul. This last email here, this last link, I should say, is actually to our website. And so I have a code for you. SMSK. I have 10 free assessment links available on the website. Regular is $97. But what you're able to do is scan the code, click the link on the website, put your information in, but use the code SMSK for 100% off. Once you submit their promo code, you'll be able to download your welcome letter, complete your assessment, and then you'll schedule a one-on-one phone call with me to debrief your report. For those that don't get there in time or selected me to follow up via email, well, we can have that conversation when it's time there too. So that's all for me. All those links, there's so many in the chat. I apologize for the overwhelm of information, but I want to make sure that we equip you with everything that you need. So, Mackenzie, I'm going to pass it back over to you and let you.
Oh, you froze for a second there.
Take us home with our last 10 minutes here.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Trey. That was fantastic. Are you
Sorry.
going to keep your
I'm going
camera
to
off for
log in on my.
bandwidth?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sounds good. No problem. So if anyone has any questions, please pop them in the Q&A button, and we'll refer to that to ask some questions. In terms of the links, if you don't have time to go through the chat to access the links, don't worry, you're going to receive a follow-up email, and Trey and I are going to ensure that all of the links that have been shared in this presentation are included in that follow-up email. So don't worry, you'll have everything that you need after this session. So Trey, to get us started, one of the questions that was supplied by someone who previously registered is, what are some effective strategies for incorporating social emotional learning in schools? In schools.
Okay, I'm back. I keep trying to turn my camera on and it's just not working. So can you repeat the question one more time for me just to make sure I heard the whole thing? You're on mute still.
Oh, thank you. What are some effective strategies for incorporating social emotional learning in schools?
Yeah, for sure. So you've got a couple levels. If you think about the district level, there is first just thinking about your adoption. So Castle, Collaborative Academic for Social Emotional Learning, they have a district resource center that you can utilize to implement their system. There's also a website that I had pulled up, but I just shut it down for bandwidth. It's called exploreharvard.gse or SEL. If you just type in Explore Harvard, it will actually show you about 30 or 40 frameworks for social emotional learning and character development implementation. So from a district level, you really just want to think about a framework to adopt, whether it's Castle SEL or a strengths-based approach like the one we talked about today. And then from the school level, there's those same types of implementation models. So we're looking at school-wide development, both for the adults is my primary focus, and I think that's the only focus you truly need to have, at least for the first year or two. And then you have the curriculum component for the students. As far as the classroom goes, that was the question, so to speak. In the classroom, it's so much about teaching beyond technique, or if you're thinking about one-on-ones, a lot of it is letting yourself be vulnerable, sharing the stressors that you have or the things that you have going on, and taking yourself off of the pedestal of being the expert and the guru and moving into a place of being vulnerable to share, hey, I'm learning too. We learning together. Okay. I know life is hard and I've been through some similar things. And so we're going to figure out how to go through this together. At the classroom level, it's much more about you, the person, than it is any curriculum that you adopt. Your mindset is going to determine the outcomes of what SEL looks like in schools because it's happening whether you have a curriculum or not. It's more so about your intentions.
Fantastic. I realized I was on mute again. Thank you very much, Trey. If anyone has any questions, please pop them in the chat. We have about 5 minutes left. But just on that note, I do just want to share a fantastic resource that I think people in the audience listening in will find particularly helpful. So I'd like to just kind of highlight one of our resources at Strong Minds, Strong Kids, Psychology Canada. This is called Thrivelandia. It's an online resource designed to help kids and teens ages 10 to 17 build their resilience. It's grounded in psychological science, and it's a really fun, interactive online resource that explores 5 different lands to help foster resilience. So that includes Mount Mindful, Grat Grove, which is gratitude, Opto Island, so optimism, Calm County, which is self-compassion, and then Pertropolis, which is perseverance. So this is currently available for free for youth and parents with the coupon codes that are available on the screen. And there's the QR code to access Thrivelandia directly. It was made in consultation with youth and leading psychologists. So it is a fantastic resource. I highly recommend it. And then we also have Thrivelandia access for teachers. So teacher access includes the 5 lands of Thrivelandia, but it also includes lesson plans, PowerPoints, and anything that an educator is going to need in the classroom to be able to facilitate and lead sessions on these specific 5 lands. So if you're interested, this will also be included in the follow-up email, so you don't feel like you have to scan the QR code right now if you don't have the time. But just in the interest of time, if there are no additional questions in the chat, I would like to say thank you very much, Trey, for this fantastic presentation. I know that the audience was really engaged, and we had some fantastic conversations. So thank you. Trey's contact information will also be included in the follow-up email, as well as all the assessment information. So I highly recommend taking advantage of all of the resources that we've talked about today. We're offering them to you at no charge, so definitely check them out. And then I just have a quick follow-up survey as well for people to take some time to complete. This really helps us at Strong Minds, Strong Kids identify topics that are interesting to you folks, so that we can really ensure that we're meeting the needs of our community. So I popped it in the chat. And Trey, I just want to say thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. And I see you've raised your hand.
Yeah, since you can't see me, I'm gonna, as folks finish that last survey, I want to answer Renee's question. Renee had asked earlier, let me make sure I find it. She said, so my question is, are we raising intelligent young adults but failing to teach them how to be empathetic? I think that's a wonderful question, Renee. And I think to go maybe a level or 2 deeper, I think it's more than empathy. Empathetic is one component, that's one key lever, which is really, if we look at emotional intelligence, that would be the social management aspect. But if we think about developing kids and people, emotional intelligence, SEL as a whole, there's about 4 to 5 competencies. So the ones we focused on today were the self-management and self-awareness competencies. And that's where I believe that we're truly failing young people and adults. We don't help folks understand their own self-identity, their own self-agency, their own sense of autonomy, because we don't recognize our strengths. When we recognize our strengths, when we recognize what we are the best at, we can walk in them. And so the pieces that some of you all recognized as I was presenting, the confidence or being assured, it's because I'm doing what I love, and I've been doing what I love for a long time. And so I work on my strengths all day, every day, and I allow those strengths to take flight and those weaknesses to take a back seat. I think a lot of times we teach our kids, whether on purpose or not, how to be fearful, how not to ask questions, how not to be bold, how not to try, how not to dare, when that's exactly what we should be teaching. But it takes a recognition and acknowledgments of your strengths to make that a reality.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Trey. I think that was a great way to end the session. Did you have any final last comments before we close the session?
That's all. Check us out, strengthsbasedtraining.com. I'm highly active on LinkedIn, so catch me there as well. I'd love to work with you in a one-on-one capacity. I'd love to help you deliver these assessments in your practice, and I'd love to come serve your school as well. So thank you for the opportunity, Mackenzie and Strong Minds, Strong Kids, for your work with adults and students and stress. throughout Canada.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. That concludes the webinar, and keep an eye out for your email. Well, we'll be sending you all these resources. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.